Kushbu, you were a part of the Puttaswamy judgment. You represented a party in the Puttaswamy judgment. So I would like to know, how has the concept of privacy, not just data privacy, but if you look at the earlier judgments like Karak Singh and others, so you find that the whole concept of privacy, apart from what we see as data privacy in the online space, has been evolving in India. Right? It started with questioning the domiciliary visits by police to so-called, criminals' homes, and the question of rogues gallery, whether one's photograph can be put up and displayed by police, and so on and so forth. But you find that the philosophy in this has been changing, and the Supreme Court has been in line with the thought in the world, taking an increasingly positive and stringent view of the privacy of an individual, to the extent that in Puttaswamy, it was rendered as uh, a fundamental right under Article 21. So I would like to know from your perspective, as how do you find this journey of privacy law in India vis-a-vis what is happening in the world?
So if we say this is as latest as 2017 or 18, if we talk about right to privacy, and uh, before that we never spoken with regard to that. Right to privacy can be one of your fundamental right. So yes, it has become part of your right to life, and it's one of the fundamental right. Apart from right to privacy, when I say that I need privacy, it just doesn't say that privacy, it includes a lot of other aspects also. Whereas Puttaswamy is concerned, it did elaborate, discussed the points, I think, with regard to right to be forgotten, um, that you should have a right to correction. So a lot of it's not just India. Almost all the nations were having a lot of discussions when it comes to privacy, or when it comes to, especially when all your tech giants or all your social media apps, or your e-commerce platform, all of them collect your data and keep data. And it came to an extent that you can change people's mind. You can actually force people to think in certain direction. You can change their entire future by by use of internet. You can practically, I think you can do war without even going on. You don't need practically now to be, to be at the border. Whereas if you have knowledge, if you have information, if you have better hold on the information, you can practically wage war. You can have economically, you're better off. There is no stream which has a benefit when it comes to, if you have an access to information. So initially people were not aware, but the moment people started, it became more of knowledge came in, that how exactly what can be done. It can be weaponized. Information can actually be weaponized against you. So is when you talk about that, oh, I need right to privacy, because a lot of times we felt, or everybody felt, that anything to be done, whereas my laptop is concerned or mobile is concerned, is between me and nobody can see me. But as we say that, I think physically things can be hidden, but when it comes to internet, nothing is hidden. You have footprint all over. Things can be there can be analysis done over you. They can, I think, it's been said in a lot of conferences. I have been where I have been the lawyer, but others are the one talking about technology. They say that we can predict, we can tell your nature more than you can tell you can tell about your own nature. So we can even tell you. I mean, there was one of the statement given by one of the tech giants, talking about technology, that how amazing we are, that he went on giving an example that I can tell about the lady that when she is pregnant before she even analyzing it when she is not. So when we talk, yes, technology is a boom, but information gathering became difficult, and especially the way they started gathering the information and the usage of it, and when it comes to security of the nation also came in play. So looking at all of that, yes, right to privacy came in play. Now, when we look at K. Puttaswamy judgment, it was on 9 principles, basically, privacy principles, which were being elaborated over there. We talk about principle of notice, that whenever any of these platforms or any of tech giants or internet, whenever they're using, there should be, they should comply with your principle of notice, principle of choice. There should be a consent. Uh, 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 there should be a limitation. There should be a purpose limitation, and also the collection, the purpose for which they are collecting. Security aspect, when it comes to my data, when it comes to accountability, yes, there should be, when I say right to be forgotten, there should be option of access and correction also, that I can correct my data, or I can have access to my data, what exactly you have. So these were the few things which were being discussed. Puttaswamy, if you say the general principle of privacy which were being come out, apart from that being fundamental right, is that they even elaborated that what exactly the consent is, because when we talk about consent, I don't have an option. You say that you have to agree with it. So consent, when they say that it is only valid when reasonable to expect that the individual understands what exactly, or the nature and the purpose of and the consequences of the collection or use or disclosure of the personal information you're taking from me while I'm consenting. So it's not just a consent or a blanket consent you take. You have to have little elaborative. They even went on talking about that whereas an individual is concerned whose personal data you're taking, it's reasonable to expect that the individual understands and his consent is obtained. It's a must to obtain his consent when it comes to his personal information, and there should be a disclosure. He should have access to that information at the same time, and it should be for the reasonable purpose. You can't have everything from a person without a purpose being linked to it. So yes, these were the few aspects which were discussed, whereas Puttaswamy
But while we see that we discuss these principles, then there has to be a mechanism, because just declaring a right does not ensure that this right comes in existence. You need to have mechanisms. For example, if you see Singapore, then there are information commissioners there, and there are very stringent fines. If you look at GDPR, then GDPR allows you punishment up to fine up to almost 4% of your total turnover.
global turnover.
The global turnover, and that is for every breach. So very stringent norms have come up in the West. Similarly, if you look at America, there are several laws like HIPAA is for health, and for children's data, there is another kind of law. Plus for critical infrastructure, they have different kind of laws. While in India, we are wanting to see our PDPR being discussed in the parliament and being adopted as a law. I think there is still some time before that happens. There has been a good deliberation on PDPR, but I think one has to have an understanding of data and privacy and technology from a very holistic point of view. So when the internet evolved, it basically was experimental. Nobody wanted to tax it. People wanted it to be free in the US. So the whole culture of Silicon Valley, where the only law is that there's no law. So for it needed that initial environment for innovation and growth of technology. Similarly, the whole economic model of internet was that it was initially free, and free up till a point where it becomes viable to generate some kind of revenue on that. That is why when these social media giants started, then with the free product, you actually were the product. Your information, your browsing habits, your locational data, your preferences, that became something which was to be sold. So while you are on a computer, there is a plethora of information going out. Just by visiting a site, you can experiment this. Just Google for what does the internet know about me, and it will take you to certain sites which will tell you like around some 200 parameters, which by just logging in you're giving. It tells which operating system you're using, which browser you're using, what is your screen size, what is the particular version of your operating system, whether it has been patched or not, whether there's an accelerometer on your device or not, whether the accelerometer is being used or not, so on and so forth. So 200 kinds of information just goes by logging in somewhere. Now imagine that when this shifts to the phone, there is much more access, because the phone is virtually you. It's the replica of you. It knows much more about you. It has your confidential photographs. It has your communication. It is much more dangerous than a laptop, because the laptop stays at a place. So all this information is being rapidly collected and utilized. You'll be very amazed to know that there are technologies called as pixel and conversion tracking. So, and they are normally owned by these large giants like Google and Facebook and other people. They are basically data vendors. So these people deal in your data. So their business model is that they can target accurately. So if you want to sell, let's say, a new kind of hair oil to the youth in a rural area, so then they would allow you to target their phones or their Facebook pages with this particular demography, applying filters. So as an advertiser, you can go to Facebook and say that, okay, I have this new hair oil and I want to target, let's say, rural Maharashtra for youth between 20 and 30. So they would give you this particular demography and this particular kind of choice based on who is more likely to buy. But see, this is okay till here. But when it goes to Cambridge Analytica, then you have, prediction of voter behavior. So Cambridge Analytica said that just on 100 likes, it can predict everything about you. So they developed an algorithm wherein they found that what was your political orientation, what kind of person you are, who would you support, whom are you most likely to vote for, and then they could highly, with an algorithm, segregate as to who are the fence sitters, who can be affected, who are the people who are supporters but not likely to vote. So they can do a fine-grained analysis, and as you were saying earlier, Kuku, that it can be used to cause a change in thinking. Uh, there's a very strange experiment conducted by Facebook. It's called digital contagion. You may Google for it, wherein in one country, for the whole country, see these people have trending algorithms. So not everybody that you follow appears on your timeline. So they have an algorithm which basically chooses and allows you to see what you see on your homepage. So Facebook decided that they would post sad photos for one whole month. So they did that. And from other parameters, they found that this was like a digital contagion. It was like an infection. And they found that the whole country was depressed. After 1 month, they just said sorry and closed down this experiment. So imagine how sinister it can be, and that your privacy is not just about your individual privacy, but it can threaten the loss of your privacy can threaten your society, your nation state, your democracy, your values, social order. Everything can be threatened. Uh, there is an interesting book which I think everybody should read. It's slightly old. It's called Data and Goliath by Bruce Schneier. It may be available on internet. Please download this book and read. It it makes you understand how metadata can be used. So, for example, there is somebody who's purchasing drugs, and there's somebody who is selling these drugs. So while the content of communication may not be available, but the very fact that one is making the calls to person who is involved in drug dealing leads to a lot of information. So metadata can also, so in data and privacy, normally there are no bounds on sharing of metadata. Metadata is your subscriber information, your locational data, to whom have you made a call, uh, so on and so forth. So this is available, while content is still not available. Uh, we may again, later on during discussion, Khushbu will come to the point where question of sovereignty and data localization, where we are finding hindrances in investigation, because let's say somebody is cheated or a woman is stalked, or there's a case of revenge porn, but when we go to these platforms, then content and data is not available. So that becomes a huge problem. So privacy is a double-edged sword, because they talk about privacy and they talk about free speech, and then do not give you information which is pertinent to investigation of crime, which is the bounden duty of state. So we are into a situation where we have to, understand these rights in a very fine-grained manner. But having said so, I would like to understand from you as to, there is a lot of talk about the technology and the way technology processes data. For example, Arogya Setu. So people were initially very worried about what is happening to Arogya Setu data. Is it a surveillance program? Is the code available? Recently, government put that, open source that code and put it on GitHub. The code is available for anybody to review. So how do you explain this to the general audience as to, when technology and law intersects, then how does one ensure privacy?
Okay. So when we talk about privacy principle which are being laid down by Puttaswamy, what exactly individuals have or a company have to undertake when it comes to practical mechanism when it comes to company and the individual over there. So there are certain key areas one can one has to look into it, that um, it should always create a level playing field as to not target individuals or anybody with, specifically when it comes to characteristics of an individual. Notification has to be there with the people when it comes to any kind of breach or anything, and there should be specific penalties imposed for any kind of infraction that takes place. At the same time, if any breach is done, it should be justifiable. One cannot actually abstain themselves from any kind of cyber attacks. I mean, I think later in the session you can talk about cyber crimes or attacks that are happening. But at the same time, if there is any breach, it should be justifiable and with clear remedy, and there should be a forum for people when it comes to redressal. I would come on the data protection bill, which is pending, and how it is incorporating all of those things. But yes, this is one of the way that there should be a forum for redressal, specific dedicated forum for it. There should be a clear legal backing when it comes to your provisions, when it comes to specific policies or provisions you have, whereas your corporate or whereas your app is concerned with regard to aspects of what is the intended use of the information which you're collecting of the user. At the same time, there should be an automatic purging of data that can be incorporated, say even after what specific time. When we say sunset clause, if we talk about, so there should be a stipulated time period for the data which you collect, and the data which you do not delete even after the stipulated time. You should have clear-cut mechanism to put in place as to this is the data which would be there and this is the data which not be there. There should be a system to have safety by design, specifically from hackers or any malicious or activity that can happen which can target individuals or individuals' data which is there on your platform. Apart from this, you should have, the app should not leak information. And when you talk about, so I have one more reservation when people say that when any of the privacy policy you pick it up today, pick up any app, pick up anything, the moment you read terms and conditions and privacy policy, if they are not clear, they keep on and on and on going with 10 different pages. They do not talk about, when they talk about that we might share your data with third party, but they actually never disclose who the third party. When we specifically, if I just now, let's pick up Arogya Setu policy, and so when we talk about the principle of consent, it clearly defines that yes, it does take consent. It did let go of the consent part for specific purpose, but yes, it does. There's a choice. There's a consent as to whatever data they ask from you. They were very clear on that. When I talk about the sunset clause, it was very clearly mentioned over there that this is for the specific purpose, and the purpose was also very specific, that is for the purpose of contract tracing apart from the physical tracing which is going on. So it is for the specific purpose, health specific collecting data. At the same time, the data would be deleted once the purpose is done. Apart from that, they were very, very, very clear on in their policy that if you wish to not process, if you wish not to continue with it, you may delete your app, and the moment you delete your app, your entire data would be deleted. It would not be there. When I talk about accountability, when I talk about security, they were very clear on that the data would be encrypted, and it would be the moment it has to go. When it comes to there were three criteria as to green, yellow, and red, I suppose. The moment it reaches the red, if it has to, it would go, and it would also go in an encrypted form in a dedicated government server, which is in India. So I think looking at, in a nutshell, when I look at the principles, the 9 principles of privacy, and when I compare it with Arogya Setu, it's been very clear when it comes to choice, when it comes to collection, when it comes to purpose, when it comes to limitation, when it comes to security aspect. Almost all of them, and I think the issue which was raised was when it became when the choice, the principle of choice was let go of, and people who have been asked, especially the government officers who are on who are in the front running, taking care of the nation, and especially the people who want to work now, or who want to step out and have a permission of working. It was made compulsory for them to download, and compulsory for them to have Arogya Setu. So is when the entire uproar was there, and a lot of petitions were filed in courts, in different high courts, talking about that principle of choice is let go of. So for that, I think I would say, I would again go back on Puttaswamy judgment and talk about that when it comes to right to privacy and when it comes to right to health, there has to be a clear-cut, you have to look into the principle of proportionality over there. Even Puttaswamy, while coming on jurisprudence, while writing the jurisprudence of a right to privacy, was very categorically defining that when it comes to right to health in case of epidemic, when it comes to public health epidemic, or when it comes to such scenario, the authorities may use health records provided that they have anonymity of the patients over there. So Puttaswamy judgment also clearly defines that. Apart from Puttaswamy judgment, when we talk about United Nations principles of limitation and derogation of provisions, this International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights also clearly defines that when it comes to public health may be invoked. I mean, if I quote, that it may be invoked as a ground for limiting certain rights, certain individual rights. So when we compare and the kind of situation we are into, the epidemic or pandemic which we say we are facing, I think when it comes to right to health and privacy, not that your right to privacy should be completely let go of, but yes, looking at certain principles and following the anonymity and following other safeguards as to security and accountability, yes, one has to look into the state of health in a little paramount situation, especially when right to health of other individuals is at the stake, vis-a-vis your right to privacy.
So I'm talking of client attorney privilege. Yesterday, I read something that there's a famous law firm in the US which has been breached.
Yes, with the data of all the famous celebrities.
Famous celebrities. So they are now saying that they would, leak the data of very famous celebrities, including the US president. So apart from this, if you look at earlier law firm data breaches, if you look at Panama Papers, so
I knew you were coming on that.
Mossack Fonseca was breached, and it led to toppling of governments in several countries. See, the Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif lost his job. Similarly, many other prime ministers and presidents who were named, they were tried, and there were regime changes. So this is highly confidential data. But I feel that somewhere law firms are not very aware of or very particular about principles of cyber security as related to privacy. I'm touching a very specific thing, and I'm talking about cyber security education of people who are dealing with this sensitive data. What do you think? How important it is for law firms to be cyber secure, and do you really feel that they are taking adequate precautions given the nature of data they are dealing with?
So let's just go a little back on it, that if we talk about GDPR, if we talk about any other country whereas their data protection bill is concerned or data protection laws are concerned, the penalties are heavy in case of breach. The penalties go up to, if I may quote, just 2019, the penalty, British Airways was penalized for almost $230 million of penalty for a breach. If we talk about US Equifax, it was almost $575 million penalty imposed just because it be imposed. Looking at that and looking at if the current, even the data protection bill, if it gets passed, it's almost 2 to 4% of global turnover can be a penalty, can be imposed, whereas Indian law firms whereas data protection bill of India is concerned. Apart from that, we have penal provisions also. So in that scenario, yes, see, law firms have always been very boutique, or has been very, they've been very, the professional services. It's not just law firms. If you look at the investment firms also, we have been very boutique, and we have been very focused when it comes to taking care of the client side of it. But yes, I do agree the part whereas cybersecurity is concerned, that does lack, whereas investment firms or law firms are concerned. If you look at data, it's almost 18% of the organizations, including your law firms and banks, investment firms are targeted by such kind of ransomware, where they know that when it comes to data, when such ransomware attack comes, all of us as a law firm or as an investment firm, we know that it would be encrypted, so we do have multiply copy of the data. But now that they are smart, that with such kind of breach, the best is, let's thread with regard to, I'm gonna disclose the data of your critical data, and when it comes to critical personal data of your clients, yes, it is a thing to talk about. So I would say that's, yes, there is a lack, because we have always been a boutique firms. Law firms have been little less when it comes to security, take care of certain safeguards, because we would also not be abstained when it comes to penalties imposed, when it comes to coming under the the current bill which we talk about, data protection bill or GDPR or any other data protection bill. At the same time, the current IT Act, with reading with the guideline which we have in place, looking at all of that also currently also, that's, yeah, there should be a mechanism to take care of whereas security or whereas security of clients' data is concerned, privileged data is concerned.
So give 4 or 5 practical tips from a
Uh,
lawyer's perspective to your lawyer audience as to what they should do. Some 5 or 6 very practical tips which they can
See,
implement.
I'll go back on the part when it comes to information technology, reasonable security practices and procedure, and sensitive personal data information rule 2011, which is section 79 of IT Act, which talks about that, specifically talks about what basic safeguard one should take if you are a data principal. So if you're a data principal, there's some ISO guideline that you have to maintain that level of security. But yes, at the same time have firewall, have your data in the encrypted form. I think you would be the better one to talk about what exactly mechanism one should take in security. But at the same time, make sure that um, uh, uh, as a lawyer, when it comes to anybody with the breach, how would you safeguard somebody? How would you save yourself? So the first thing you'll talk about that I took care of the security aspect. The breach has been third party and reasonable security measures were being taken by my end. So those reasonable security measures, which we as a lawyer would defend any firm where there breach is, maintain those reasonable security measures, have every 3 months of a check done, get a certificate by the practitioners, cyber security experts, or the firms, that whether our system is intact. That's very critical. That's one of the, I think, need of the hour, whereas we are concerned as lawyers or judiciary, because our 80% of the data which we talk about would come under the sensitive personal data or the critical data. Apart from that, I think certain safeguards can come from you. Yeah, that's about it.
Okay, I think it basically starts with simple cyber hygiene. So it's like this, that increasingly hackers are targeting more and more sensitive areas. So they're targeting education, they're targeting healthcare. We'll talk about healthcare later on. Healthcare data as to how it is critical and how significant it is, and what can happen if healthcare data is leaked or breached. So increasingly, apart from financial data, they are specifically targeting these sectors. And law firms that way, I feel, are a very easy target because their understanding of technology is good from a legal perspective, but not from a cybersecurity perspective. So what can be done is smaller things like basic cyber hygiene. Basic cyber hygiene means to start with enable two-factor authentication, so or a multi-factor authentication. If possible, enable a non-SMS based second factor. So there are authenticators which come on your mobile that if anybody is trying to log in into your phone, then through a non-SMS based authenticator, you get let's say a 6-digit code uh, on your mobile phone, which then you have to input to log in. Apart from that, then you should have a system which alerts you to any possible login attempts or any anomaly in your account if you're using any cloud-based service or otherwise. Wherever possible, use encryption. Encryption by default is enabled on various messengers and all. But see, even if you're using WhatsApp, then you would not know that somewhere by default you would have enabled backup on iCloud or backup on Google Drive. So your chats would be archived there. Similarly, your chats are stored in clear text or in an SQL database on your phone. So if you're really bothered about privacy, then you can think of whether you want to archive and back up your chats or not, depending on the kind of confidentiality you want. On emails, you can have something called PGP, pretty good privacy. It's a very simple thing, wherein two keys are generated, public key and private key. So you give your key to the other person, the public key to the other person. He encrypts the message with your key and sends it back to you, and only you can decrypt it. Nobody else can decrypt it because you only have the decryption key. So there are two keys. One is the public key. You make it available to everybody. So let's say I'm sending an email to the world, then I share it with my encryption key. Anybody who's returning writing back to me uses my encryption key to encode that answer. and only I have the decryption key. So it's like sending locks out everywhere, but the key is with you. It's a very nice principle. It's based on public key infrastructure (PKI), which is very simple to implement. You can consult an expert and implement PKI on your emails or other communication, because once you do that, even if there is something like a man in the middle attack, then nobody would be able to decrypt your data. Your data would be totally confidential. And today, given the state of computing, it is still virtually impossible to encrypt large amounts of encrypt or to decrypt, data which is in motion. Uh, Similarly, be careful and mindful about cyber threat intelligence or mention of anything related to you, to your brand, to clients um, in the dark web or anywhere outside. So you can, if you are really an important firm, then you can subscribe to cyber threat intelligence, because various kinds of data is being offered for sale every day in the darknet fora, and that's where we understand how privacy is important. Yesterday, there was the latest news which said that YouTube credentials are being asked for. So it's like an auction.
So I think overall, when it comes to, we should have a certain safety checklist. I'll not go so elaborative, but in a nutshell, yes. Looking at especially now work from home, and we as lawyers are also working from home, and entire data is at home. Certain safeguards as to manage your social media platforms. Do not just go on writing everything. Check your privacy settings. Check your security settings, whichever app you're using. Make sure that your client's data, like your work system and your personal systems are different, because 90% of the play comes with regard to whatever you click on, the URLs you click on, or different websites which you go on, or certain messages you receive on social media platforms, including WhatsApp and other places. So yes, it's ideal to have your critical data, whereas your clients is concerned in a different system than the one which you use for the personal usage. Avoid as much as how tempting it is. Avoid using or opening any of the suspicious emails or attachments. Delete those as much as possible if it's not concerning you. Uh, Keep your software updated, yes. Uh, uh, have strong passwords, passphrases if possible. Strengthen your home network at the time, till the time we are actually working from home. The virtual courts and practically entire law office and court has worked from home. Back up your online and offline files regularly. Maintain the security. Take care of SDPI rules when we talk about the safeguard. One has to take care mechanism. Take care of that. As I was talking about that, yes, do keep one outside firm, one independent entity to have security analysis done and give you a certificate when it comes to data, or when it comes to reasonable security measures or standards followed by the firm. And it's not just firm specific, but it is for everybody responsible for such breach. And in that scenario, the first thing is to provide to prove that the reasonable security standards were maintained by you as a data principal. Apart from that, I'll give one more example when it comes to cyber attacks or breaches, and how important it is looking at the kind of bills which we are seeing it as pending in India. And apart from that, the GDPR or other data protection bill around. I'll just give one recent example of Heathrow Airport. So Heathrow Airport was fined for failing to protect data. Now this specific example which I'm talking about is they were fined almost 120,000 pound by the Information Commissioner Office for failing to secure the sensitive data. This was after one of the employee of Heathrow Airport lost a memory stick that contained confidential information. Now the confidential information included the Queen, travel routes, training videos that expose the names, dates, date of birth, passport numbers of 10 people, and personal data of up to almost 50 Heathrow aviation security personnel. The security. And this entire data which was there in this memory stick was not encrypted. So now when the investigation was being done, it was found, the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office, discovered that just 2% of 6,500 workers at the Heathrow Airport were trained in data protection. it's just 2%, to an extent that they did not even have a basic knowledge with regard to encryption or putting a password, or encrypting, or have a password protection to the memory stick. So they did not had any education when it comes to data protection, or when it comes to basic data hygiene. So yes, it invited penalty of almost 120,000 pound of fine. So when we talk about that, and when we talk about us as law firms or as our clients who are corporates, yes, one has to maintain when it comes to import knowledge. I think basic import knowledge when it comes to your key personal managements with your office, with your entire system in place. Have a system in place. Now this is with regard to I think security. Now if I talk about, let's go on data protection bill which is pending. And but if we do analysis of data protection bill which is pending, that very clearly puts in place that what data can be processed or shared by any entity. It can be shared only after the consent is taken. The safeguard has to be there. It includes penalties to prevent any misuse of personal data. Because if you look at the current Data IT Act, it does talk about imposing of penalty in case of a breach, but that is very specific, that if that breach has resulted in any kind of profit or a loss. So that makes it very as a mandatory clause, or as one of the basis of imposing any penalty, or impose any penalty or any liability on the data principal who is liable for the breach. So looking at that, yes, data protection bill do cater to breach, whether any profit or loss has been gained with that data. It also categorizes data into critical, sensitive, personal data, as to there's a clear-cut definition what can be what. It does talk about, I think there was a circular issued by RBI with regard to the financial data, whereas any financial institution who has to have business in India, whether Indian entity or a foreign entity, but in case you have a business in India or any of data, whereas Indians are concerned, they need to have data center in India. They were very specific about that. Now that part is also very well addressed, whereas our data protection bill is concerned as to what data can be in India, what data can have a copy outside India, and what exactly the guidelines one has to maintain. It also does talk about that what data you can share and what data you cannot share at all. And in case of data which you have shared without a consent of an individual whose data is there, you can even have 15 crore of a penalty of your, okay, up to 15 crore of penalty can be imposed over the data principal who shares such data without your permission. So that's another relief if you look at data protection bill.
I think it is very essential that there is a mechanism in place if we really want to protect citizens' privacy and citizens' data. Because today you see that apart from a whole large organized criminal underground, cybercrime gangs, there are also nation states which are behind the data of individuals. So depending upon who is targeting you, everybody is targeting your data. As somebody has famously said now that data is the new oil. So I feel that since data has become a very valuable commodity, it also would be subject to breaches and would be subject to theft and would be targeted. What is at stake? So it's not that you just lose a single credential, because somewhere you're using some variant of that credential somewhere, and your email ID is not just your email ID. It contains a lot of your personal information. It contains your documents. We were dealing with a case wherein somebody from America, he had access to the victim's email. From there, he got copies of his passport and other documents, and he came to India and created a bank account using those credentials, and then diverted funds from that company to this particular account, and almost nothing could be done because this chap had already gone with that money. So you have to protect your personal information. It starts with you. And anybody who's, let's say, a data principal, be it a social media company, or be it your bank, or be it anybody, be it your email company, they are in a fiduciary relationship with you, and they need to protect your data. And there have to be very stringent fines to enforce this. Not only fines, there has to be a mechanism to check whether this data is being breached, or if it is breached, then what kind of redress is available, or whether reasonable security practice were in place which could have otherwise prevented this data from leaking. So learning from the West, I think, and learning from our own experience, we need to create these mechanisms. It's a very welcome step that the right to privacy is now treated at par with a fundamental right. And I feel that this would go a long way in incorporating principles of data security in design. Because, functionality is one thing, but you want all information to be rapidly disseminated, to be used in real time for giving you choices, for giving you convenience. Let's say if you add an encryption layer to it, then encryption means that you need to have extra computational resources, and it's also expensive. But if you don't have these principles of security built in, you may be using a unsafe database at the back end, which may be having a default password. Somebody would be able to enter that and breach all the credentials. Once somebody has these credentials, they can instantly check on some 200, 300 sites whether this username password is working. And we are lazy people. We use same username and password combinations at different places. So just go and check this site, which is called Have I Been Pwned? Have I Been PWNED? You would put your email address there, and you'll find that there are at least 4 places your data has already been breached. It would also tell you that where this data and when this data was breached. So once your data, one credential, username and password is out, then sometimes you recycle usernames and passwords. You sometimes use one password for multiple sites. So all that credential is out somewhere, and it is very possible that somebody would have access to your accounts, would be able to impersonate you, would be able to create an account in your name, would be able to do some crime, pretending to be you. So protect your data as if it's your money. Your individuality, your privacy is very, very important, and it needs to be protected.
I think especially when our KYC norms are very lenient, whereas we as India is concerned.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, because we hit a dead end when we investigate. So, in fact, actually, linking of Aadhaar card was something which India missed, because of all those SIM cards where Aadhaar is linked, then you find that crimes are very less, because Aadhaar is a one-way authentication system. It does not store any data. It just tells whether in a one-to-one search whether this person is same or not. So somewhere we missed this bus, and it was a very good technology stack, which would have been. And Aadhaar is also very privacy protecting, because Aadhaar is not creating a database of which service you are using. It's just giving you a one-time authentication API where you can check whether this person is same or not. So we missed the bus in Aadhaar case, and I think it would have been a very good service for stopping.
How do you ensure that once you delete Arogya Setu app, its data will be deleted as promised, especially if there is no way to independently audit it?
So there is an independent audit there, and there is also a committee by the government. But I would, also come to this point where you should understand that you have a social contract with your state, and you have to believe your state. You believe WhatsApps and Facebooks and Googles, but you don't believe your state, then I think there is something seriously wrong with you. Because then you should apply the same principle to WhatsApp and to Twitter and to Facebook, and find out what they are doing with your data, and check the privacy principles. So you will be really surprised. Yeah, please.
I have one more point to add. What exactly are you scared of the data which is being gone, whereas Arogya Setu is concerned? The government is already aware about the data of yours. I mean, what exactly practically is you're scared about in that? It is very specific for a specific purpose. It's not taking anything of yours. It's not seeing your chats. It's not seeing your emails, unlike other private entities or tech giants, so-called tech giants who talk about net neutrality, who talk about end-to-end encryption. Just have a look. 90% of the crimes happen because something is being shared by you over these platforms, and they're aware about those personal details of yours. That's how they have knowledge, and that's how they social engineer. And
is, where does the new data protection bill stand as far as right to be forgotten is concerned? Could you please substantiate with an example?
So data protection bill which is pending, it has section 28, I suppose, which talks about right to be forgotten, which says that the data principal, the one who collects your data, may restrict or prevent continuing disclosure of personal data in cases where the applicability is just determined by the judicial officer. It does say, or it restricts disclosure of personal data with regard to your freedom of speech and expression or right to information by any citizen is concerned. So your right to be forgotten is very well being catered, whereas Data Protection Bill Section 28 is concerned. It does talk about your right to confirmation. When they say right to confirmation and access every data which is being processed, it's clubbed all together. It does talk about right to correction. It gives you right as a data principle to have right over correcting your data, what has been there, that I today do not wish to have the same data, please change my let's take an example as to being married and not married. Let's take example to I would follow BJP, now my political following up is changed and I would not prefer that to be part of it, or can be anything. You can talk about data portability also at the same time, and right to be forgotten is very well been catered into whereas Data Protection Bill is concerned. As to delete my data, I do not want any of my data to be in your system, or I don't want to be part of the processing or churning of the data, be it anonymized form or non-anonymized form. So from now on, I do not want my data to be with you. So yes, you do have that right to ask. And whereas Data Protection Bill is concerned, they do ask a data protection office. Every entity need to have that, and there should be my data with you. And you can make a specific request that I do not wish to be part of churning of my data process.
Another highly voted question is, could you expand on Aadhaar linking with social media accounts? Its pros and cons.
I'll just put a nutshell, and I think Brijesh would be the better one to talk about. But if I say Aadhaar social media account, yes, it should be done provided, because when we say freedom of speech and expression, and I do have a right, and I do have a right to anonymity. If we club it, not every right is an absolute right, and the moment you do that, and when you go on committing a crime, I would not say that this should be open, but it should be linked, so that whenever the situation comes for the law enforcement agencies to track, even if they track that that certain crime has happened from this account, it actually stands there. It's done. You can't reach the person because the KYC is not in place and it's not linked with Aadhaar is not linked. Had Aadhaar been linked, see the situation that okay, I've reached the perpetrator, and it can be there. So I would say that to an extent that it is not open out there, that law enforcement agency or the government should have access right away. Due process should be followed, but in case of any kind of crime or any kind of incident that happens, whereas individual rights or security or national security is concerned, at that time, yes, there should be due process which should be followed, and there should be a way that the LES can ask the platforms, and platforms should be in a state to provide the details of whereabouts about those people. Over to you, Brijesh. I think would be the better one to ask this, to answer this.
First of all, I think it is not possible, because when you signed for Aadhaar, you signed for a limited set of things, and any court would limit it to only those services. So I don't think so social media is a part of it. So it's not happening. One. Second, whether it should happen or not, but we have to come to a primary principle of accountability. That social media is not happening in some space which is free of any norms. Anything that is a crime online, or anything that is a crime offline, be it stalking, be it revenge porn, be it defamation, be it insult to national honor, it's also a crime online. Thirdly, if you believe in freedom, then you should believe in owning up what you say. You cannot just hide behind a fake account and then keep on saying things which create issues and then not have responsibility for it. So there should be accountability and audit trail, which does happen. Actually, your IP addresses and everything is there with these companies, but somehow that information does not come to us when we investigate, because there is something called Section 230C1 of the Communication Decency Act in the US, which does not leave any any kind of liability on the platforms. It says that for user-generated content, they are absolutely scot-free from any civil and criminal liability. In India, it has been translated into safe harbor under Section 79, wherein these people do not have any liability until unless they are informed. Once they are informed, then they do a lot of things. They preserve the evidence, they do takedowns, and then they also, if required, have a procedure for sharing the content for investigation. But having said so, the basic question is about the internet not being a norm-free or a lawless place. It also doesn't mean that there should be a police or thought police there. See, police or policing is required only when the norms of society fail, only when somebody breaks the law. So if society is observing laws and rules and mindful of each other's rights, then no kind of policing is needed there. But still, if you see today, a lot of crime, I think I should say that almost 3/4 of cybercrime starts with social media, social engineering. So be it pedophiles, be it efforts to radicalize innocent minds, be it stalking of women, be it running information campaigns, be it fleecing somebody of his hard-earned money, it all starts with social media and information there. There has to be accountability and audit trail. Whether you do it with Aadhaar or do it somehow else is up to the regulators to decide. But time has come. In the US, Senator Hawley has also come up with an act which wants to end this kind of free immunity to social media platforms. I think 3 days back, US President Trump also signed an executive order which prevents these social media platforms from going scot-free. So the basic principle of accountability and audit trail, I think, should be supported, whether you do it with Aadhaar or whether you do it with a voluntary code of compliance, up to you.